In this video, we'll take a look at Lingua writing assignments. This allows you to easily create writing assignments based on topics and ideas you covered in class, automatically graded against rubrics and grading instructions you provide with detailed analysis and feedback provided to students. Let's take a look at how it works. Let's say I wanted my students to write an interview with a health professional. So let me enter in the assignment title, and then I can choose a submission type. So if you want your students to just type it out in Lingua itself, you can choose this one. Or if you want them to hand write their writing and then upload it over here, you can click this here. And we'll take a look at that a little bit later. So then I'll choose the start date and then due date. And then you can also set a time limit if you only want them to be able to have a certain amount of time before it'll automatically submit their writing. And then I'll enter in the topic and then the text type. So you can enter in whichever text type you want. This is the expected format that you want the students to adhere to for their writing. So I'm going to do, and then you can generate a writing prompt or you can type it out by hand yourself. So I'm going to generate it over here. If you want it to be more fleshed out, you can also click this enhance button. And of course, you can edit it or type in your own one if you would like. Then there's also a suggested word count, which is how many words, like a word range, you expect them to write. And then you can also do a word limit. So this is a hard cutoff where they won't be allowed to write anything more than this. You can also add key vocabulary terms or grammar concepts that you'd like them to use in their writing. And then you'll choose a rubric over here. So you can either use the IB rubric or the Lingua default rubric, or you can create your own rubric by clicking this button over here. So I'm going to use the default rubric for now. Then grading approach, which this is how strict or lenient you want um, the student submissions to be graded against the rubric. So I'm going to leave it standard here. And then special grading instructions is if you want something specific to be graded a little bit differently, like maybe grammar a little bit more strictly, or maybe look for a certain thing, or additional customized details that you want during the grading process. You also have the option to enable secure testing mode, which is a mode that locks down the browsers so students cannot leave the testing environment. This is great for tests and exams. We'll take a look at that a little bit later. And you can also hide the prompt before starting. So that means the students will not be able to see the writing prompt until they actually start working on the assignment itself. And then lastly, there's Quetzalita Writing Assistant, which is an AI writing assistant that will help the student brainstorm ideas and revise and edit their draft without actually giving them sentences and paragraphs to write. So just guiding them along the process. And then we also have the result visibility here. So that'll determine whether when the students are able to see their scores and their feedback, whether that's immediately or at a custom date that you set. And you can also copy for other classes if you have multiple other classes. So now let's launch the writing assignment. So over on the assignment details page here, we see all the details about the assignment. We can change the rubric or change anything here if we need it. Now let's take a look at the assignment from the point of view of the student. So while the student is completing the assignment, they have the option to highlight a word in the prompt, add it to their vocab list, and also see a translation of it. And then they can write their response over here. They can also format it with these formatting buttons over here, make bullet points, and they can also format here and also add accents over here. Now I've entered in a sample student response over here and it has some minor errors in it. So now let's submit the assignment. So now that the response has been submitted, we can see our grade for this assignment and we can see how we performed across each of these different categories. So how many points we got, some feedback, and an improvement tip. We can also click on the rubric here and we can see how much we scored for each category in the rubric. Another thing we can do is we can click on this button here to show the markup, and it's going to generate a markup highlighting all the things we did good, bad, and the fixes for issues in our writing. So you can see exactly here what the errors are and then how to fix them. So there's a markup like this for each category. And we can also click this button here to see all the errors, which this is just general spelling or everything put together, all the errors that the student made and what the fix is. Additionally, here we can see some general feedback, which these are the skill points that earned across all these different categories and overall strengths and improvements for the student. Back on the teacher's side here, we can click on submissions and also see the exact submission that the student submitted. And we can also edit their grade if necessary. And if you think the rubric was a little too lenient or strict or not graded exactly the way you wanted to, you can click regrade submissions here and change the instructions a little bit. You can regrade all students or select specific students to regrade. You can also apply a grading curve here and export manually for Canvas if you would like. So another option here you have is called Performance Insights. So these are insights across all student submissions. So the first one here is category analysis. So this is how students performed across each of the different categories in the rubric. So let's generate the analysis. So we see here exactly how the students performed across each of these categories. Some analysis over here and also the average scores. We also have overall insights here. So this is just in general how students performed across their submissions. So we see that here. So next, let's take a look at secure testing mode. So as I mentioned earlier, secure testing mode locks the browser tabs to create a secure testing space for students when they're completing their assignment. So let's take a look at it from the student side. So back on the student's end here, we see that secure testing mode is enabled. So let's start the assignment. So now in secure testing mode, the browser is locked in this window. So the only way to quit is if you do an emergency quit, which will be flagged and you'll be notified on your end. You'll be able to see how many times the student quit the assignment. Another thing is that if the student tries to switch their tab, like this for example, then they see that the tab switch is detected and logged. So this will also be visible to you on the teacher's end. So back on the teacher's view over here, we can just click on submissions and we can see exactly how many times the student left the tab or did an emergency quit. And we can click on the submission and we can also adjust their score accordingly. Next, we'll look at the Quetzalita Writing Assistant. So as I mentioned earlier, this is an AI writing assistant that will help the student formulate their ideas and revise their draft without actually giving them sentences or paragraphs to write. So let's take a look at how it works. So over on the student's end here, we see the writing assistant has been enabled. So let's start the assignment. And so what we can do here is click this Ask Quetzalita button here. And ask Quetzalita, hello, how can I get started here? So then Quetzalita won't straight up give the answer to the student, but force the student to think about uh, the concepts themselves and come up with their own conclusions. So let's say, um, so then it'll go on and help the student come up with the ideas themselves. The student could also ask what types of relevant vocabulary And so it gives some more advice over here. So also after the student has written some of their writing, they can ask Quetzalita to help them out and give them pointers to revise their draft. And it will help guide them over here. So this is a great tool for students to help understand the prompt, come up with ideas, and revise and edit their drafts without actually um, giving them answers and making sure that they do the work themselves and are actually learning through this process. Another thing I want to mention here is it's very difficult for students to cheat here. Even without secure testing mode, this is a very secure environment to make sure students don't cheat. So copy and paste is disabled. So students cannot copy and paste into Google Translate or something. And if they open their in-browser Gemini agent like this, then you see that Lingua automatically detects it over here, and the student will have to close it out. So lastly, let's take a look at writing assignment with a handwritten image upload submission type. So with this, students will have to take a picture of their writing and upload it into Lingua, and then it'll automatically be graded based on that image, and all the feedback and scoring will be given just as normal. So you go through the same process here, entering in all the details for the assignment, and you'll see here on the assignment page that it clearly says the submission type is handwritten image upload. So now when the student completes the assignment, they'll have to upload an image of their work here. They can upload an image file or a PDF or whichever one they want. So after it uploads over here, the student can see their work and they can also check their legibility and visibility. So this will run a quick check to see if the AI is able to read their handwriting. And we see here that it's good here. So if it gives a score of like fair or poor, then the student may have to retake the picture and upload it. So once the student is happy with their writing, they can submit it. And we can see here on the results page, it's been graded just as normal. We have all the details, the rubric here. And if we would like to see any of the markups, we can click this button here and it'll switch to the image transcript. So the student's uploaded file is written out in just regular text, and then that's marked up, as you can see over here. So you as a teacher can also view all of this, can see the legibility, you can read their work over here, or click this button over here to see it in better detail. You can download it or print it if you need to as well. So this is a really useful way if you want your students to practice writing, but you want them to still write it out by hand because it's better practice for actual exams, then this is a really good technique you can use here. So that wraps it up for writing assignments. Thanks for watching.